Kevin, did you watch it all in one sitting?
No,
Okay.
I didn't either.
Yeah, I didn't either.
It's
it
not
was
worth one sitting.
honestly it was tough to get through.
It was. It was tough to get through for multiple reasons for me. It didn't suck. Like, I enjoyed it a lot more than Heat. I enjoyed it. I honestly think I enjoyed it more than Rebel Moon, but it's like, it made me feel like I was watching a film for a class, and I just could not make myself fully pay attention. I had to take it in like little spurts. So, not bad, and I do like what I think the message is, and I like the art and the visuals, but yeah, I could not watch that in one sitting. I know we literally just said this about our last film that we reviewed, but it felt like two different movies, and that's intentional. That's by design. But the second half was a lot less comedic than the first half, to an extent where it was kind of jarring, I think.
There's probably less comedic breaks in the second half. Yeah.
Well, tonally as well, because like in the first part, we have this character who thinks that he's Jesus, and every other line is comedy, or maybe even every line is comedy, or it's like hopeful, cheery, funny. But then when he turns into his alter ego or second version of himself, it's honestly more like social commentary than anything that's supposed to be funny. Of course, there's funny moments, like when they do the head, shoulders, knees, and toes thing. That was pretty entertaining. Um, but yeah, it's that's when they're trying to put their stamp on the message for the film in the second half. So
The
it's less
message
funny.
and the story, even on its face, is like, yeah, I think it nails down a little bit more. Like, okay, you're starting to care about the characters a little bit at this point, and
Are we?
it. I think you're supposed to like there. You've learned a lot of the different motivations that the different people have, and you see Jack struggling with his insanity. Like, you think that he's just a complete lost cause, but then in the second half, it's like, oh, he's snapped into reality to some extent, and he's dealing with tics, and these like he's saying things
Stuttering.
compulsively. You see him like really struggling against that insanity, and so there's a little bit of like, oh man, like, is he actually going to pull through this? Is he actually going to, be successful in life, or are they going to get him committed? I don't think you're supposed to be like super invested, but there's a little bit more of a serious tone of actually paying attention to the story at that point.
Yeah, there were a few comments he made where he acknowledged his insanity, where he said something along the lines of, feeling like people are out to get me is part of my schizophrenia or part of my paranoia. So there were parts of the movie where he acknowledged what he had. So it felt like he was slipping in and out, back and forth between different personalities.
Yeah, and I did think it was funny how when people were telling him the truth, which was that the his family was plotting to get him committed, he would take that to be like, no, that can't be true, because if I believed that, then that would make me a paranoid schizophrenic, because then I would be thinking that people are out to get me. And so he would reject that and get really upset. It's like, that's actually true right now. But
Yeah, the wordplay and dialogue was the strong point of the film, in my opinion. Like, the visuals were cool, the costume design was cool for the for Jack, for the JC character. The JC version of Jack was cool. But yeah, the dialogue and the writing was that typical British banter humor, and I thought it worked really well. It wasn't boring. I mean, some of it was kind of stuffy and snobby and like aristocratic, but that's intentional.
well, guys, it is July of 2025. We're out here trying to review some new movies, but the theaters were just so dry this week of anything worth anything that instead of reviewing a new movie this week, we're looking way back in time. We're looking at an old movie that performed very poorly, did not make money. It's not very well known either, but it has
Just like
gained.
us.
I never heard of
Yeah,
it before you told me. So
yeah, but it has gained a little bit of a cult following over time, and that is The Ruling Class of 1972. I originally watched this film just because I don't remember where I saw it, but I just saw an image of Peter O'Toole's character as Jesus, and it was so disturbing. Like his face was just so shockingly weird looking. I was like, I have to know what this is from. Why they surely this cannot be like a serious attempt to make a real Jesus character because it looks so messed up. And so I looked into it a little bit and it's like, oh no, this is a movie where there's an insane person who dresses himself up as Jesus and he's supposed to look really weird and off. And so I was like, well, let's watch this movie. Did not watch it in one sitting. And on rewatch this week, I also did not watch it in one sitting because it's a movie from the early 70s that is paced as such and can be a little difficult to get through. But I do think there's a lot going for it. How do you guys feel about your experience?
I think that 2.5 hours of runtime was more than overkill. I think for what they wanted to accomplish, an hour and a half would have definitely sufficed. Pacing was honestly awful, but it wasn't a complete bore to sit through. There were entertaining things happening on the screen. Primarily for me, with the JC character, the schizophrenic version of Jack, I enjoyed him on the screen. I was like, hey, what's this quirky, wacky freak gonna do next? When he changed into his second form, I was a little bored because, as an American, we're obviously three Americans, we don't really understand the cultural significance of like royalty, aristocracy. We've never dealt with that. I can definitely see how this was catered to a very specific audience. I think that's one of the reasons why this didn't land super hard, like internationally, and people in our country have never really even heard of this. But for what it's worth, I didn't hate it, and clean up the pacing a little bit, I'd probably watch an edited version.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. My biggest thing that I did enjoy was the pacing. It felt slow. It was hard for me to keep up. I mean, like I said, I had to stop this movie, I think 3 or 4 times to resume, just because I'd get 20 minutes in and be like, "Oh, let's go. Where's this going? It's so slow." But also at the same time, I went into the movie thinking it was just a straight up movie, but it ended up being more like a National Lampoon or Mel Brooks produced movie. It had some of that British humor in there.
Monty Python.
Monty Python. There you go. I couldn't think of that right off the rip, but I did enjoy that joke about public school. That was hilarious.
Refresh my memory.
I think the uncle was talking with the psychiatrist about Jack, and he says, "So what happened to him?" And he says, "Well, his father sent him somewhere with a bunch of crazy people and terrorists." And his uncle's like, "Oh, you mean public school?" So
I don't remember even hearing that.
I mean, that's relatable to an American audience.
Definitely. That was the beginning, yeah. So it was at that point I realized that this is not a straight up movie. This is more like a comedy. And then once you get into that mindset that it's a comedy, you kind of ease into, the rest of the movie. The pace was still a little slow, but it was kind of expected from a National Lampoon or Monty Python kind of thing. So it grew on me.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting. Something this film does is it is very slow, and it can come across as a completely ordinary film. Like if you were to just play it from a random point in the movie, not knowing the context, you might easily go 5 minutes, 10 minutes of just regular old stuffy 1970s film talk of just some snobby British people talking to each other about politics and this motivation and that and this doctor says this. And so I was just saying, I was commenting on how, this movie can come across as like a very normal, serious, stuffy film, and then just absolutely out of nowhere you'll have some very out-of-pocket thing happen, or they'll break into a musical number and just like, everyone snaps into some kind of song and dance routine for like 30 seconds, and then it just goes back to normal.
My God, those were so random. It's hard to even expect them.
Well, you guys know the
can't see
one
'em coming.
You guys know the one I was referring to earlier, the head, shoulders, knees, and toes thing.
Yeah.
You do or don't?
Yes. Wait, wait,
I think
wait.
I
Are you
remember.
talking
Yeah.
about the like the them bones,
Or whatever the fuck, yeah, yeah. I can't even remember what it was
the
called.
hip bone connects to the
Yeah, yeah,
whatever
yeah, yeah,
when
yeah.
he's
When
Jack the
he's
Ripper.
Jack the Ripper, dude, that was I
That's
liked
kind of
that
like the
one.
biggest one. I
Hmm.
enjoyed that. I
And
think
it
the one
comes
that
out of
caught me the most
nowhere.
off, yeah, the one that caught me the most off guard was when he's having the professional evaluation by the court-appointed psychiatrist, and he says something that sounds insane, and the psychiatrist gets right up on him, and they come eye to eye, and he's like glaring at him, and I'm like, what is going? Like he's about to say something, and then they just both look at the camera and start singing their like alma mater or whatever from their school. That one really got me.
Just an update for the audience. I'm profusely sweating right now because my Wi-Fi turned off mid-recording, and I just got back in after some agonizing few minutes. So I'm like fuming right now.
Technology will do that to you.
It's not technology; it's the people supplying my apartment complex with Wi-Fi, the lowest quality. I'm just gonna
Well,
stop.
I could give a couple quick tidbits about this movie that I think are a little bit interesting. They the the mansion or manor, I guess technically, that they filmed it in, is really incredible and very impressive. And it was built. It's in England, but it was built for a guy named Gregory, which I think is kind of funny. It's not very old. I think it was built in the 1900s. Honestly, the ruling class. It was originally written by Peter Barnes. Okay, Peter Barnes wrote the play, and somehow Peter O'Toole got the rights to the play, and then Peter Medak, I don't know how you say his name, was out drinking with Peter O'Toole and convinced him to actually use the rights to make a movie. And I think it's hilarious that the writer, main like actor and director are all Peters. Very strange coincidence there.
That goes with the theme of the Holy Trinity.
Yeah, they are the yeah, that's the Trinity.
It's also a biblical name. See, it was all orchestrated by a higher power.
So this movie opens with essentially a very long drawn out sequence of a an earl, a high level ruling class member, um, coming home to his mansion and trying to engage in some autoerotic asphyxiation, combined with some cross dressing and interesting activities. And he accidentally hangs himself and is dead. It's kind of amazing how long they spend on that scene. He just is like going on this very long tirade, very kind of an uncomfortable scene, but it sets the stage a little bit for how this movie is
I
is
liked it.
not. You enjoyed it. Definitely sets the stage for the movie not being quite normal. But then it goes directly into a somewhat normal sequence of events where it's sort of just introducing characters. We meet Sir Charles, who is just a very like run of the mill standard aristocrat, and his wife Lady Claire, who hates Sir Charles, and also a bishop who I think is the brother or brother-in-law of Sir Charles, and they are all essentially trying to figure out what to do with the estate, because the Earl has just died, and so they need to figure out what's going to happen to all of his wealth. And they find out that £30,000 has been given to Tucker, the butler for the mansion.
I love that
Um,
guy. Probably
yeah,
one of my
I
favorite
enjoy
characters. He's one of my favorite
Tucker's
characters in
great,
the movie.
absolutely. And then the
Perhaps you
manor
should go with the
itself,
silk today, sir.
and the mansion
Sorry.
itself is given to the Earl's son, and everyone is dismayed by this because the Earl's son has spent the last 8 years or so in a loony bin, essentially. And as they are learning of this and trying to figure out what to do about it, in walks Jack, except he's not Jack. He is Jesus, and he has this air about him that is just so it's so interesting. But he walks into the room and he gets in front of everybody and he's like, "Let's pray." He starts launching into this self-absorbed prayer to himself essentially because he sees himself as God. And the camera is just rising up and this chorus music comes in. I don't know, that's one of my favorite moments in the film because it's early on and it's like this is going to be a ridiculous ride. What were you guys thinking during that scene?
I mean, I appreciated the simplicity in the cinematography. You know, how they just, all they did was lift the camera to give you that idea of the holiness that they were trying to portray. Simple camera tricks that were very effective and went a long way. I appreciated that very much. As far as that part of the plot itself, I kind of got lost in what was going on. I know they said he was crazy and he was coming in talking about I am Jesus, so I knew he was a little off, but I hadn't gotten used to, his, switching back and forth personality wise yet. So at that point in the movie, I was still a little thrown off. But it circled around and it ended up making sense in the end. So
It's okay if you don't have any specific thoughts on that. Load it up.
Well, I have specific thoughts actually before he's introduced. I thought the erotic asphyxiation scene was actually really funny. Like the guy's butler came in there and had an assortment of like satin and different material nooses for him to choose from. It was like that's what high class like fetishism, the top tier erotic asphyxiation experience right there. Like you have your little D ring in the ceiling that you can put your noose on. You can pick your specific tutu. You're on the governor's bed, dressed up as well. Like, yeah, that was pretty cool. He really messed up by not having someone in the room to kind of like spot him, basically. But yeah, could have been a pretty enjoyable experience, but he kind of fumbled the bag.
I'm sure he had plenty of enjoyable experiences before that, so.
Definitely shades of David Carradine.
All right.
I was not a big fan of Sir Charles or his son.
The acting or just the character?
The character in general. The acting was good. I mean, the acting was good enough that it made me not like the character, so I can't really fault the guy for his acting. But story-wise, I wasn't a big fan of that character. It seemed like he didn't give a shit about anything except the money itself and, keeping his status as a sir. So I ended up kind of despising that character.
Yeah, so, once we've introduced JC and everyone's sort of accepting the fact that he has inherited the manor, they start plotting on how they can get him, or how they can get the manor out of his hands. And one of the plots that they come up with is to have him marry, have a child, and then commit him to an institution. Because I guess if they just have him committed, that doesn't really solve their issue. They have to have it to where the estate is passed on when he's committed. And if he has a son, or I guess just a child, then they can have it pass on to his child. And so they find this lady, Grace Shelley, and I'm not sure, did you guys get the impression that she was like I forget the word for it. I guess prostitute. There's a better way to put it. What do you think her background was?
I don't know if they actually stated that she was supposed to be a prostitute or.
I picked up that she was Sir Charles's mistress. And then when she's getting ready for the wedding night, she talks about she's done, all kinds of stuff like stripping and cabaret and stuff like that. So she did have a seedy past, but
right, yeah, she has a bit of a past
was...
with sort of that kind of work. But they, when they give JC the idea of marrying someone, he says he's already married to. I'm not sure the person's name, but it's a character from like the 1800s, and
I believe it was Marguerite something.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, some French actress or something. Or no,
and so they have they have Grace pretend to be this character. They dress her in a traditional dress from that time period, and JC completely buys it. Um, and there's just so this movie. It's so long, but I feel like there's many just really interesting scenes. Like I really enjoy the scene where they're courting and they're doing this like bird thing, like going in circles and making bird noises at each other. It's so strange. Um, I really enjoy the wedding itself, where the bishop is so uncomfortable with it because the bishop is a really religious person, and JC's character is blasphemous in his own existence. Everything that comes out of his mouth is blasphemy to this bishop. And so Sir Charles is like pressuring the bishop, like, get on with it, just do the ceremony, just get it over with. And the bishop is like crossing himself like between every step of the marriage, just like, I can't believe I'm doing this. Lord, forgive me for, committing this blasphemous fake wedding. I was laughing through that scene. But I think it's interesting how Grace actually ends up falling in love with Jack, rather than just doing what she was told to do. She actually really does like him, and Jack really does treat her well until the end of the movie. And I find that kind of believable.
Well, okay, yeah, I was going to say, I find that believable too. You said it surprised you that they included that, like that she wasn't just a plot device who was supposed to deceive him. Yeah, I think it was like the logical conclusion that she fell in love with him. I mean, he is the main character as well. And he's not dumb, actually. Like, although he is following multiple schizophrenic delusions, like, he's a very intelligent character who says a lot of profound and very well thought out things. Like, he's not just like ridiculous and off the wall. I mean, he is at points, but there's like an educated air to it, which I thought it made perfect sense that she fell in love with him.
Yeah, I guess he can be so off the wall, especially early in the film, that there's a part of you that's like would she even feel safe around him, right? I mean, he's very unpredictable. He flies into these very passionate speeches at nothing, just all the time, and he'll get up on a cross and sit there for hours. Like, after he has a mental breakdown, he just gets up on the cross until he feels better again.
Well,
Side note, I
go ahead.
I love the scene when Tucker goes up to him and dusts his shoes because he's been up there for so long. But go ahead with what you were gonna say.
Well, in the end of the film, she basically just states that when he was JC, she felt like he truly loved her, and he was, always intimate with her, and she just felt loved. So with that contextual information, it makes perfect sense that she would fall in love with him. And then when he was Jack, he was much more clean cut, clear with his motivations, and I mean, he was falling into the role of royalty and a very important person, so obviously she would like that about him as well. So within the film, she got the best of both worlds with this character. I mean, obviously until the very, very end, but I think it made sense, and that was I'm glad that she wasn't just a plot device who served to like deceive him for 15 minutes and then just leave the movie. I think I like what she added to the film.
Yeah, I think it's a strong point of the film is that, sort of just that plot that to usurp his ownership turns into an actual marriage where she ends up loving him and defending him. Really, Sir Charles, he is meant to be a character that you dislike, and everyone is sort of on his side at the beginning of the film, and over time he gets less and less support. I feel like the bishop kind of doesn't like his ideas because they're not necessarily following the rules of the church. Of course, Grace stops liking him because she falls in love with Jack. And his own wife, I mean, his wife hates him from the beginning of the film, really. But Lady Claire, she has this fascination with Jack. And I feel like towards the beginning of the film, it comes across like when she's sitting on the couch and she's asking him questions about what is it like to be God? Why do you think that you're God? It comes across as sort of like she's
I
just doing
love
this
his
sort
answer
of.
to that question.
Yeah,
You want to
me and
deliver
Alex
it?
talked about that.
Well, she asked him, how do you know you're God? And he's like, well, I found myself praying to God and realized that I'm talking to myself. I love that answer. I thought it was hilarious. So if that's
No,
the
it's
case,
a good.
I feel like I might be God because when I talk to God, I feel like I'm talking to myself. So
It's very clever
sorry, I
writing.
didn't mean to.
Yeah,
It
it's a
was
great line.
it
You're good.
was, and I picked up on that too. I was like, the writing on this is very. It's sophisticated is the word I want to use. You have to have like a sophisticated palette of humor to understand it, because it wasn't just these little, quick wit, jokes. These were jokes you had to think about. They had some build up to them, so it was very clever, the writing. I agree with that 100%. I thought the writing was very clever. I just the only thing I had the issue with the movie was the pacing. It just felt slow to me. So
No, I agree. It is lacking in that department. Yeah, so Lady Claire, I feel like in that scene, when to me she was coming across as like she's kind of making fun of him. Like she's asking these questions, but she's really just sort of self-amused and just like, oh yeah, this is so ridiculous in her own head. But as the movie progresses, you realize that she actually does have a strong fascination with him. And I think that maybe she really is asking those questions genuinely in that scene. One thing that she does to try to help him is she bribes the psychiatrist that's working with him over like long term. I think she actually sleeps with him to basically convince him to really try and help JC, or help Jack. She's using that as a tool to like get him to heal Jack, because what she really wants to get to is Jack. And of course, towards the end of the film, she finally makes her intentions clear and pays the price for it. But yeah, she has a very strong fascination with him. I think there's several meanings and different layers. I'll let you start.
You'll let me start?
Yeah, I've been gabbing my yab for a while.
Well, what I chose to take from this movie, and I think this is partially intended, is the sort of sad notion that ignorance is bliss, and then a more mature, educated awakening will only lead to pain and suffering, and in this case, murder. It's just that when Jack is Jesus in his mind, he is very happy, bubbly, positive, in his own way, he's wise. And when he is Jack the Ripper, he's obviously cold, calculated, murderous, and not a fun guy to be around. So the entire first half of the film, they're trying to turn him into a sane person. So they completely stamp out his positivity and bliss and turn him into their version of what they think is sane, which is actually a cold, calculated murderer who literally thinks that he's Jack the Ripper.
Yeah, I think that's one of the big takeaways, and that's there's more than one way to interpret that line. So you kind of interpreted it as ignorance is bliss, and when you become more educated or more aware, it comes with pain and violence and stuff. I think using the same sort of lens, though, you can also just think of it as like it's trying to say that society is, at least the society that this movie is talking about, which is like 1960s Britain, was essentially very accepting of insanity if it was directed in a negative way towards change. And if someone was more like, oh, everything is love and positivity and whatever, then that was just seen as absolute insanity. So like
Yeah.
society rejects JC, society accepts Jack the Ripper just because he can deliver these speeches about how Britain needs to rule through fear, bring back the death penalty, and blah blah blah. We need to remember how to punish people, and that's seen as completely sane, which is very similar to what you were saying, just a slightly different way to look at it.
Well, the thing I picked up on was these people were rich and were willing to do anything to stay that way, including, ignore a family member's health and deterioration. And it's like all they were concerned about was maintaining their status. Even as Jack just kept circling the drain and getting worse and worse. And even when he was his outbursts that were, when they became violent, it just seemed like they were just concerned about themselves. It was all everybody. It seemed like everybody in the family was narcissistic and just wanted to stay rich at all costs. And that's what I picked up on. And I hate that about people. So it's kind of similar to the way things are now. Everybody will just willing to do anything to be famous. All the stupid shit they do on YouTube and TikTok. These terrible pranks that people do just to be relevant. It's so people are so fascinated with being relevant and being known and being admired and admonished and rich that all integrity and all decency goes out the window. And that's the theme that I picked up on.
I don't disagree with you at all, Kevin, about the real world examples that you were trying to relate it to, but I actually think as a society we're sort of moving away from that whole like wanting to be an influencer, wanting to be worshipped, and people worshiping influencers and wanting to be part of their audience. I do think that there's sort of a shift happening now where people are way more ready to like see a streamer and then just like drag them into the street and get the guillotine.
In a video game. Yeah, I mean, this movie is called The Ruling Class, and it is it makes general criticisms to sort of British politics, and it certainly makes criticisms of the ruling class, which you talk about people being desperate to have money, doing things for money. There is sort of a distinction to me, though, between just, wealth, and specifically when we're talking about the ruling class, we're talking about the highest, most wealthy people in society who do not work at all, essentially. And their wealth is just inheritance. These are people who are born into more wealth than they can imagine, and assuming they at least like manage their assets to some extent or pay someone to manage their assets, they stay wealthy through their whole life and just pass it on to the next. And there's some comments, I think it's most of the way through the film, probably Tucker, old Tucker makes some comments about how, if you are born into wealth and you basically make your own rules about what you should do with your time, it makes sense that you'd go insane. I mean, there's no rules. You are essentially just, it's like you have too much freedom and no one to tell you no.
I think the film even says that at a point too. Like it basically explicitly says that. I can't remember which character has that dialogue, but he's explaining.
I think it's Tucker.
Yeah, he's explaining why all of the elite class are like genuinely insane is because there's no bars holding them in. They can just do whatever they want. They are the rule makers. They are at the tippy top. So they, like you just basically said, there's it's only up from here basically in terms of their insanity, which is why you can wear a tutu and literally hang yourself while your butler supplies you with different nooses. I'm glad that that's still at least seen as insane these days. Like, nobody would hear that their friend is doing that and be like, oh, that's normal. Like, at least we haven't gotten to that point yet.
I think some people would probably say that that's perfectly acceptable behavior, but that's neither here nor there. Despite the issues with pacing, and just general kind of dated aspects of the film. I do think that the writing is very strong. I think um, all of the characters have sort of interesting arcs, believable motivations, and there's definitely some unexpected twists and turns. And the jokes are just so unexpected, and they do get to me. Like when I was going to mention this earlier, but obviously the key moment in the film when we transform JC into Jack the Ripper is his encounter with someone who calls himself the Electric Christ, and then adds to that. The Electric Christ is kind of funny in of itself, but then he adds the High Voltage Messiah, which is just like, who came up with that? That is so ridiculous. Uh, but little things like that just make this movie sort of special to me. Like, I think there's a world where this movie could have been almost as popular as Monty Python. Um, if it had been packaged a little bit cleaner and marketed a little bit better, I think this could have been a cultural icon, but it just kind of didn't hit like it could have. Missed its potential.
I okay. First impressions, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that. I think that Monty Python is what it is because of the extreme levels of over the top ridiculousness, like the Black Knight scene and the killer rabbit and stuff like that. Like that is,
Is that a flesh wound?
Yeah, that is over the top to a ridiculous amount extreme, and the ruling class does not go that far. I mean, it's like eccentric for sure, and the tone is very weird, and not a lot of films replicate that. But cultural icon wise, I think this film tried to do a lot with its messaging. It tried to do a lot with its dialogue, and I in no way am saying, oh, it was impossible for it to ever be like classic cultural icon. But I think it's a little bit too big of a package. It's not really easily digestible for the majority of people. Monty Python is very digestible. I mean, you can just sit in front of the TV and veg out and look at the wacky things happening on the screen. So if we're talking about like mass appeal, where in an alternate timeline, people are like, "Oh, I love the ruling class. Have you seen the ruling class? You got to see that." I don't think that that's a very common reality that's out there, personally. But hey, I've only seen it once.
If it had been packaged in a more accessible, digestible manner, then I feel like it could have been a lot more popular, and it could have been one of those things that people quote all the time. Or even like, this is sort of a far-fetched comparison, but something even like Napoleon Dynamite, which, that movie is definitely a cultural icon. People quote it all the time, and it's very low key. Its jokes are very flat, but and the pacing, there is no pacing to that movie, but it's like every scene is just so perfect, and I'm not saying Ruling Class stands up to that, but there's an element to it where it's like it is very meandering, but almost every scene in of itself has something kind of very funny about it to me. And with that, I will give it my rating of 6.5.
What was your rating for 28 Years Later?
I think it was 5.5.
You look like you're expecting me to also give a rating.
You guys have to give ratings. It's required.
Okay. Well, like I said earlier, this for me it felt more like, I'm back in film class and I'm watching something to try to learn about some film device or something. So I felt like I was being educated more so than like enjoying something. So with that being said, like a 5 or a 6. I think that's reasonable. I don't like to rate films that I've only seen once because of course I miss things, and you can't really fully appreciate 2.5 hours with one viewing. I would never claim to be able to do that. You've seen it twice. So, but upon first viewing with that caveat, I'd say 5 or 6 for me.
Yeah, I feel you on the film class thing. On the Tubi app, it would show the little black dots. Like, you could tell it was a projector movie. So it had that old feel to it, which made it, like, I agree with you on the film class. It's like I was watching some old movie. rating wise, it was very cleverly written. The pacing killed it, in my opinion. So I'm probably going to give it a score of 5. But that's going to be on a sliding scale because I might have to watch it again. Just as you said, Will, I missed a few things. You guys mentioned a few things that happened that I think I may have missed in the dialogue. But with it, the way it started out, it ended up finishing a lot better than I expected because it was tough to get through.
You know
I
what we
watched
should
20
do?
minutes. I watched 20 minutes. I stopped, and I watched 20 minutes, and again stopped, and it took me a couple tries to get through it.
Listen, guys, when we get our own studio, especially since this movie's free on YouTube, we need to have just a live viewing reaction, us three watching it again in person, just with our own dialogue and commentary. That would be very fun. I do want to do that.
That could be fun.
And we should dress up like the characters, too. Like, I want to dress... Alex, you can be the Jack the Ripper version. I'll be the Jesus version. Kevin, you can be the
Dibs on
mistress.
Grace. Dibs on Grace.
Dude, I don't know what they did to his face, to O'Toole's face, to make him look the way he did when he was as Jesus. I don't know. He was insane.
It was like contour right here and right here. It made him look like he had crazy high and like super defined cheekbones. He looked a lot like the lion from The Wizard of Oz to me. Every time I looked at him, I thought that.
It was a unique
Well,
look. I'll give him that.
I think y'all's ratings are pretty fair. I mean, with how like slow it is, it wouldn't have surprised me that much if you guys were like 3, if you were giving it 3s. So I'm happy that you're up to the 5 to 6 range. I think what brings it up to 6.5 for me is just the elements of, like, it's very unique for its time period. I don't think I've ever really seen a movie quite like it. And some of the jokes are strong enough that, yeah, it's sort of like enjoyability, packaging, pacing is down at like a 3 range, but then like jokes and uniqueness are more of up at like a 7 to 8 range, and I just kind of sort of meeting in the middle.
What was this movie rated when it came out in theaters?
I don't
You
even
guys
know if
that
it
answer?
got shown in theaters. I kind of doubt that it would have.
I would say because I think back then you couldn't show scenes of the asphyxiation and whatnot. So I'm curious if it was rated or how it was.
Well,
It had
they
to have
did
gone
play
straight
it
to video.
on TV. I saw something that they played it on, maybe it was, I'm not sure if it was BBC or CBS or what it was, but they broadcasted the movie and got in trouble for it because it was a little too risque for the time period. I mean,
It was rated. It was rated PG. At least that's what the theatrical poster says.
Well, sometimes they have to retroactively rate stuff because it might have come out at a time where there wasn't a rating system that was universal. I mean, this wasn't even an American film. PG, there also only used to be PG and R, so, I mean, this certainly wouldn't have been R.
Well, guys, thank you for this video. Froom! We're going to be closing the Awkward Purgatory Froom channel with a little bit. I'm sorry. I just had to say, I love the way he says Froom.
I'm going to include that in the video.
Please do. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, oh, we just lost Will. He did say that his Wi-Fi was acting up.
Bro, what the
Poor William.
What?
Are we actually watching this Jurassic World movie?
Maybe, but Superman comes out next week too. I don't know if you saw the message in the group chat. He said, "Give him a second with this bullshit."
Mm-hmm. He's gonna come back in here in a rage. He's gonna say something about how his Wi-Fi was set up by
Irish.
He's ranting in the group chat.
Oh, I see.
Spectrum Wi-Fi. That's all you need to say. That makes a lot of sense.
It's going to kick me out again. I don't have Wi-Fi. I think my computer's just operating off of, like, pure f***ing hatred.